In the heart of Renaissance Florence, as the sun sets behind the majestic dome of the cathedral, a different kind of revolution is about to unfold. Not one of swords and armies, but of ideas that will echo through the centuries. It is far better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. These words, penned by Niccolò Machiavelli, would forever change our understanding of power and politics. The year is 1513. Within the confines of a makeshift cell, where shadows dance on cold stone walls, a middle-aged man furiously scribbles by candlelight. His name is Niccolò Machiavelli. Once a respected diplomat and civil servant of the Florentine Republic, he now finds himself exiled, tortured, and fallen from grace. The scratching of his quill against parchment breaks the midnight silence. Each word he writes is born from bitter experience, each phrase shaped by years of witnessing the raw mechanics of power. In this humble cell, far from the marble halls where he once walked among princes and kings, Machiavelli is about to give birth to one of history's most controversial and influential works. What drove this Florentine civil servant to write such a revolutionary treatise? What experiences transformed this dedicated republican into the man who would become synonymous with political cunning? The answers lie in a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth about human nature and political power. Join us on Modern Age Chronicles as we unravel the extraordinary story of the man who dared to describe power not as it should be, but as it truly is. A story that begins in the glittering courts of Renaissance Italy and continues to resonate in the corridors of power today. If you value deep dives into history's most fascinating figures, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Modern Age Chronicles. Hit the notification bell to never miss our weekly journeys through time. Let's step back into Renaissance Florence, where the fate of one man would change political thought forever. Behind every great thinker lies a complex human being, shaped by their times, their struggles, and their triumphs. Niccolò Machiavelli's story begins in the flourishing streets of Medici-controlled Florence in 1469, in a home where tradition met austerity. Born into the twilight of medieval Italy, young Niccolò emerged from a peculiar social position. His family name carried the weight of centuries of Florentine history, yet their coffers told a different story. The Machiavellis, while noble in lineage, had long since lost their fortune. His father, Bernardo, worked as a lawyer and debt collector, maintaining a modest living while nurturing his son's intellectual growth. In the family's modest library, young Niccolò discovered the ancient worlds of Rome and Greece. His humanist education would prove rigorous and transformative. While other noble children played with wooden swords, Machiavelli immersed himself in Livy's histories and Cicero's orations. Latin flowed from his tongue as naturally as his native Tuscan. Love would find Machiavelli in the form of Marietta Corsini, whom he married in 1502. Their union would produce 6 children, bringing both joy and financial strain to the household. Yet behind closed doors, Machiavelli revealed himself as a devoted family man, his letters to Marietta showing a tenderness that stands in stark contrast to his political writings. The theater became his passion, and literature his escape. Few know that the man who wrote about the cruel realities of power was also an accomplished playwright. His comedy, The Mandrake, remains one of the finest examples of Renaissance theater. But destiny had grander plans for this lover of arts and letters. 1498 marked a turning point when, at just 29, he ascended to the position of second chancellor of the Florentine Republic. This role would thrust him into the heart of European diplomacy, sending him on crucial missions across the continent from 1500 to 1512. Picture Machiavelli in the courts of France, in diplomatic meetings with Cesare Borgia, observing, analyzing, and forming the insights that would later revolutionize political thought. These years shaped not just the diplomat, but the political philosopher he would become. Then came 1513, a year that would break and remake him. The Medici family's return to power saw Machiavelli arrested, tortured, and exiled. In the depths of his despair, stripped of his position and dignity, he found his greatest purpose. From 1513 to 1527, in what we now call his literary period, Machiavelli would produce works that would echo through centuries. What emerged from these experiences was not just a writer or a theorist, but a man who had seen the machinery of power from every angle, from the heights of diplomatic influence to the depths of a prison cell. His observations, tempered by personal suffering and enlightened by classical learning, would forge a new understanding of political reality. This was Niccolò Machiavelli, diplomat, playwright, father, husband, and revolutionary thinker. A man whose life would become as fascinating as the ideas he would unleash upon the world. Step with me into the vibrant heart of Renaissance Florence, where every cobblestone tells a story and every corner breathes history. The narrow streets, paved with uneven stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, wind like ribbons through the city. These labyrinthine pathways, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, create an intimate dance of shadow and light as the Tuscan sun plays between the towering stone buildings. Rising majestically above the terracotta rooftops, the Palazzo Vecchio stands as an eternal sentinel. Its imposing tower, stretching toward the heavens, casts long shadows across the Piazza della Signoria below. The fortress palace, with its crenellated battlements and rough-hewn stones, serves as both seat of power and symbol of Florentine pride. In the bustling markets, a sensory feast unfolds. Merchants from distant lands display their exotic wares, shimmering silks from the Far East, aromatic spices from Arabic ports, and precious metals from across the known world. Their voices rise in a melodic cacophony of different languages and dialects, haggling and trading in the universal language of commerce. The city itself is a living canvas, where artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci leave their indelible mark. In countless workshops, apprentices mix pigments and prepare surfaces while masters transform blank walls into transcendent frescoes. The sound of chisels striking marble echoes through the streets as new masterpieces emerge from pristine stone. The air itself tells Florence's story. The earthy scent of leather from the tanneries mingles with the sweet incense wafting from countless churches. Fresh bread from the bakeries, herbs from the apothecaries, and the metallic tang from blacksmiths' forges create an aromatic tapestry unique to this Renaissance metropolis. Daily life pulses with intrigue and ambition. In noble salons, adorned with tapestries and frescoes, political machinations unfold over goblets of Tuscan wine. Powerful families, the Medici, the Puzzi, the Strozzi, wage their subtle wars of influence and alliance. Every gesture, every word carries weighted meaning in this sophisticated dance of power. The taverns of Florence serve as informal embassies, where diplomats and spies trade secrets in hushed voices. Behind thick wooden doors, deals are struck, and alliances forged or broken over plates of wild boar and flagons of wine. The warmth of the hearth conceals the cold calculations of statecraft. In quiet cloisters and private libraries, ancient knowledge comes alive again. Monks and scholars bend over precious manuscripts, their quills scratching quietly as they preserve and translate the wisdom of antiquity. Greek and Roman texts, saved from obscurity, spark new ways of thinking about humanity's place in the universe. This is Machiavelli's Florence, a city where art and power, beauty and ambition, learning and intrigue intertwine in an eternal dance. A place where the medieval world transforms into something new, where the future of human thought and expression is being forged in the crucible of Renaissance imagination. The arc of Machiavelli's life unfolds like a Greek tragedy in 3 distinct acts, each shaping the man who would revolutionize political thought. Our story begins in the rise of a promising young mind. Born into a Florence ablaze with humanist learning, young Niccolò absorbed the classics with remarkable vigor. His father, though of modest means, maintained an impressive library where the boy immersed himself in Livy, Cicero, and Tacitus. This classical education would later provide the intellectual foundation for his revolutionary ideas. By 1498, at the remarkably young age of 29, Machiavelli's brilliance catapulted him into the role of second chancellor of the Florentine Republic. His diplomatic career proved nothing short of meteoric. For 14 years, he traversed Europe on critical missions, crossing paths with the era's most formidable figures. He observed the ruthless efficiency of Cesare Borgia, witnessed the grandeur of the French court, and studied the machinations of the Papal States. Perhaps his crowning achievement during these years was the creation of Florence's first citizen militia. Breaking with the traditional reliance on mercenary forces, Machiavelli argued passionately for a citizen army, believing that a republic's defense should rest in the hands of its own people. This innovation, though ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated his practical approach to governance. But fate's wheel would turn dramatically in 1512. The Medici family, backed by papal forces, returned triumphantly to Florence, dismantling the republic Machiavelli had served so faithfully. The changing tide swept away everything he had built. Suspected of conspiring against the new regime, he was arrested in February 1513. Within the cold walls of his prison cell, he endured the brutal reality of political change. Torture on the strappato, his shoulders nearly wrenched from their sockets. The physical pain, however, paled compared to the mental anguish of exile. Banished to his small property at Sant'Andrea in Percasina, Machiavelli found himself abruptly cut off from the political life that had defined his existence. Each evening, he would remove his muddy farming clothes and don the formal robes he once wore at court, attempting to maintain dignity in isolation. Yet from this darkness emerged his greatest triumph, an intellectual renaissance that would echo through centuries. During his exile, Machiavelli wrote feverishly, producing works that would revolutionize political thought. The Prince, completed in 1513, emerged not merely as a guidebook for rulers, but as a brutal dissection of political power. Its unflinching analysis shocked contemporaries and continues to provoke debate today. This period also saw the creation of his Discourses on Livy, a deeper exploration of republican governance that some scholars consider his true masterwork. Unlike The Prince, the Discourses revealed Machiavelli's profound appreciation for republican values and civic virtue. His final years, from 1513 until his death in 1527, proved remarkably productive. Though never fully restored to political power, he wrote histories, plays, and political treatises that secured his intellectual legacy. His comedy, The Mandrake, achieved considerable success, demonstrating his literary versatility. Machiavelli died in June 1527, just months after witnessing another dramatic shift in Florentine politics, the final expulsion of the Medici and the brief restoration of the Republic. Though he never regained his former position, his ideas had already begun their long journey through history, challenging and influencing political thought for generations to come. His legacy transcends the simple label of political theorist. Machiavelli emerged as the first modern analyst of power, stripping away idealistic pretenses to examine the raw mechanics of governance. His insights, born from personal triumph and tragedy, continue to illuminate the nature of politics and power in our own time. The historical tapestry of Machiavelli's life and thought comes to us through a rich variety of primary sources, each offering unique insights into both the man and his era. Among the most revealing documents are Machiavelli's diplomatic dispatches, meticulously preserved in Florence's state archives. These reports, written during his years as second chancellor, showcase his keen analytical mind at work. His detailed observations of French military organization, his assessment of Cesare Borgia's campaigns, and his analysis of papal politics reveal a diplomat with extraordinary insight. One particularly fascinating dispatch from 1502 describes his first meeting with Borgia, capturing both the Duke's charismatic personality and his calculating nature. The personal letters to his family, especially those written during his exile, paint a strikingly different portrait. In correspondence with his wife Marietta, we discover a loving husband and father, far removed from the cold pragmatist of popular imagination. These letters reveal his daily struggles, his loneliness, and his desperate desire to return to public life. Particularly moving is his letter from December 1513, describing his daily routine in exile. When evening comes, I return home and enter my study. I enter the ancient courts of ancient men, where I am not ashamed to speak with them and to ask them the reason for their actions. The original manuscripts of his works provide invaluable insights into his thought process. The surviving manuscript of The Prince, housed in the Vatican Library, shows numerous revisions and marginal notes, revealing how Machiavelli refined his revolutionary ideas. Particularly interesting are the crossed-out passages that show his struggle to express controversial concepts in diplomatic language. The Florentine Republic's official records offer crucial context for Machiavelli's career. The Consult I Pratici, Advisory Council records, document his rise through the bureaucracy and his contributions to policy discussions. Payment records reveal his modest salary as second chancellor and the financial constraints that would later plague him. Turning to artistic representations, several contemporary portraits survive, though scholars debate which most accurately depicts him. The most famous, attributed to Santi di Tito, shows Machiavelli in his later years, a lean face with penetrating eyes and a somewhat sardonic expression, wearing the simple black robes of a Florentine citizen. The Renaissance maps of Florence, particularly the detailed Carta della Catena from 1490, help us reconstruct Machiavelli's physical world. These maps show the city's major landmarks, including the government offices where he worked and the streets he walked daily. Of particular interest is the area around the Palazzo Vecchio, where most of his official duties were conducted. The Chancery documents themselves provide fascinating glimpses into the daily operations of Renaissance diplomacy. Official seals, diplomatic codes, and elaborate protocols all speak to the sophisticated administrative system Machiavelli helped manage. The Chancellery's record books, with their careful notation of incoming and outgoing correspondence, demonstrate the meticulous nature of Florentine bureaucracy. Perhaps most intriguing are the marginalia found in books from Machiavelli's personal library. His copies of Livy and Tacitus, though few survive, contain handwritten notes that offer direct insight into his engagement with classical texts. These annotations reveal how he processed and interpreted ancient wisdom, later incorporating these insights into his own works. The physical evidence of his imprisonment also survives in prison records from 1513, including chilling documentation of his interrogation and torture. These stark official documents contrast dramatically with the intellectual achievements that would emerge from this period of suffering. All these sources together create a complex mosaic of the man and his times, allowing us to see beyond the myth of Machiavelli to the complex human being who forever changed political thought. The ripples of Machiavelli's thought continue to expand across the centuries, transforming our understanding of power, politics, and human nature in ways that remain profoundly relevant today. His immediate legacy represented nothing less than an intellectual earthquake in political philosophy. Before Machiavelli, political treatises largely focused on how rulers ought to behave, presenting idealistic visions of virtuous princes governing with divine guidance. Machiavelli shattered this tradition. By describing power as it actually operated rather than how it should work, he inaugurated a revolution in political thinking that still reverberates. Perhaps his most controversial and influential contribution was the deliberate separation of politics from conventional morality. This wasn't merely an academic exercise, it fundamentally changed how we think about governance. When Machiavelli suggested that a ruler must sometimes act against faith, against charity, against humanity, and against religion, he wasn't advocating evil. He was acknowledging the complex reality of maintaining political order in an imperfect world. This breakthrough gave birth to modern political science. By applying empirical observation and practical reasoning to political problems, Machiavelli established a new methodology for understanding power. His approach, studying historical examples, drawing practical conclusions, and focusing on measurable outcomes rather than moral ideals, laid the groundwork for contemporary political analysis. The influence of Machiavelli's thought on today's world is profound and multifaceted. In modern political realism, his fingerprints are unmistakable. When contemporary analysts discuss the importance of viewing international relations through the lens of power rather than ideology or morality, they're working firmly within the Machiavellian tradition. His pragmatic analysis of power finds striking parallels in modern corporate and political strategy. When leaders talk about realpolitik, maintaining a balance of power, or the importance of appearing virtuous while being prepared to act otherwise, they're drawing from Machiavelli's insights, whether consciously or not. In contemporary geopolitics, Machiavellian concepts surface repeatedly. His observations about the relationship between military power and political stability, the importance of adapting to changing circumstances, and the role of public perception in maintaining authority remain startlingly relevant. When modern leaders navigate international crises, they often face the same fundamental challenges Machiavelli described 5 centuries ago. His influence extends beyond traditional politics into organizational theory and leadership studies. Modern corporate leaders study the prince not as a historical curiosity, but as a practical guide to organizational dynamics and power relationships. His insights about human nature, that people are fundamentally self-interested but can be motivated to great achievements through proper leadership, inform modern management theory. Machiavelli's impact on military thinking also endures. His advocacy for citizen armies over mercenaries, his analysis of the relationship between civil and military power, and his emphasis on the importance of adaptable strategy continue to influence military theorists and practitioners. Even in the digital age, Machiavelli's observations about information control and public perception remain pertinent. His understanding of how leaders must manage their image while maintaining effective control speaks directly to contemporary challenges of political communication and social media management. Perhaps most significantly, Machiavelli's core insight, that political analysis should focus on how people actually behave rather than how they should behave, continues to challenge and inform our understanding of politics. In an era of increasing political complexity, His clear-eyed approach to understanding power dynamics provides valuable tools for analyzing contemporary challenges. The true measure of Machiavelli's impact lies not just in how his ideas have influenced history, but in how they continue to provide insight into current political realities. Whether in international relations, organizational leadership, or political strategy, his analytical framework helps us understand the fundamental dynamics of power and governance. His legacy reminds us that while the specific challenges of politics may change, the fundamental dynamics of power and leadership remain remarkably consistent across time. In understanding Machiavelli, we better understand not just Renaissance politics, but the eternal challenges of governance and power in human society. The world that shaped Machiavelli was one of extraordinary transformation, where medieval certainties crumbled before an onslaught of revolutionary changes. The Italian Renaissance represented not merely a cultural flowering, but a fundamental shift in how humans understood themselves and their place in the universe. Florence stood at the epicenter of this transformation. The revival of classical learning, championed by humanist scholars, revolutionized education and thinking. In the city's libraries and private studies, texts from ancient Greece and Rome emerged from centuries of neglect, offering new perspectives on politics, philosophy, and human nature. This renaissance of classical wisdom didn't merely copy ancient ideas, it reimagined them for a new age. Scholars like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola synthesized classical thought with Christian theology, creating new intellectual frameworks that profoundly influenced Machiavelli's worldview. The patronage system, epitomized by the Medici family, transformed the relationship between art, power, and society. Under this system, merchants and bankers became the new arbiters of culture, commissioning works that celebrated both religious devotion and human achievement. The streets of Florence buzzed with the activity of workshops where artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo redefined the possibilities of human creativity. This environment of artistic and intellectual ferment provided the backdrop for Machiavelli's revolutionary political thinking. The period witnessed intense conflicts between secular and religious authority. The Catholic Church, still wielding enormous political and spiritual power, found itself increasingly challenged by secular rulers and new ideas. The Papal State's involvement in Italian politics created complex power dynamics that Machiavelli observed firsthand during his diplomatic missions. These tensions between spiritual and temporal authority deeply informed his analysis of political power. Perhaps most significantly, this era saw the emergence of the modern state. The old medieval order of overlapping feudal authorities gave way to more centralized political structures. New forms of administration, diplomacy, and warfare emerged. Florence itself exemplified these changes, developing sophisticated bureaucratic systems and diplomatic networks that Machiavelli would help manage. The technological innovations of the age dramatically reshaped society. Gutenberg's printing press, introduced in the previous century, revolutionized the spread of information. Books became more accessible, ideas circulated more freely, and literacy expanded beyond traditional elites. This information revolution helped create the intellectual environment that would eventually carry Machiavelli's ideas across Europe. Commerce underwent dramatic transformation as new trade routes opened. The Mediterranean remained crucial, but the discovery of sea routes to Asia and the Americas began shifting economic power northward. Florence's banking houses, including the powerful Medici Bank, financed trade throughout Europe, creating networks of economic interdependence that influenced political relationships. Religious reform movements gained momentum, challenging traditional Catholic authority. Though the Protestant Reformation would erupt fully after Machiavelli wrote *The Prince*, the intellectual and spiritual ferment that would lead to this schism was already evident. These religious tensions added another layer of complexity to the political landscape he analyzed. Maritime exploration opened new horizons, literally and figuratively. Portuguese and Spanish voyages of discovery challenged old geographical assumptions and brought Europeans into contact with previously unknown civilizations. These discoveries forced thinkers to reconsider their understanding of the world and human society, contributing to the intellectual revolution of the age. The military sphere saw crucial innovations. The development of gunpowder weapons transformed warfare, making traditional fortifications obsolete and changing battlefield tactics. These military changes contributed to the evolution of state power and influenced Machiavelli's thoughts on military organization and the relationship between military and political power. Urban life itself was transforming, Cities like Florence became centers of innovation, where traditional social hierarchies faced challenges from rising merchant classes. New forms of civic organization emerged, attempting to balance competing interests of various social groups. This urban dynamism provided crucial context for Machiavelli's analysis of political stability and change. This was the world that shaped Machiavelli's thought, a world where old certainties crumbled while new possibilities emerged, where traditional authority faced unprecedented challenges, and where human potential seemed suddenly limitless. His genius lay in recognizing and articulating the fundamental patterns of power and politics that emerged from this transformation, patterns that continue to influence our understanding of political life today. Let us explore the enduring questions and contemporary relevance of Machiavelli's insights, challenging ourselves to wrestle with timeless dilemmas of power and governance. Does power inevitably corrupt? Machiavelli's observations on how power transforms individuals remain disturbingly relevant. Consider modern leaders who entered office as reformers only to become what they once opposed. His insight that power reveals rather than corrupts, showing who people truly are when constraints are removed, offers a fascinating lens for analyzing contemporary political behavior. When we examine cases like the international response to climate change, humanitarian interventions, or economic sanctions, we confront the age-old question: do ends justify means in modern politics? Machiavelli's pragmatic approach suggests that outcomes matter more than methods, but in an interconnected world with immediate global communication, can leaders still operate by such principles? How do Machiavelli's ideas translate to our digital age? His observations about maintaining power through perception and reality find new relevance in an era of social media, fake news, and instant communication. His advice about appearing virtuous while maintaining the capability for decisive action speaks directly to modern leadership challenges. The dynamics of power in international relations today remain profoundly influenced by Machiavellian principles, reflecting a balance between moral posturing and pragmatic self-interest. Nations often navigate these tensions in ways that echo the strategies Machiavelli outlined centuries ago. For instance, energy politics demonstrates the calculated interplay of cooperation and competition, with countries leveraging resources as tools for influence. Trade negotiations, too, frequently blur the line between economic diplomacy and warfare, as tariffs, sanctions, and subsidies are wielded to secure national interests. Military alliances and strategic partnerships, while often couched in terms of shared values, are underpinned by realpolitik, ensuring mutual benefits and deterring common adversaries. In the digital age, cyber warfare and information manipulation have become modern battlegrounds, where states employ deception and disruption to protect their sovereignty while destabilizing rivals. Populism and political manipulation are vivid examples of Machiavelli's enduring relevance. His insights into the importance of managing public perception resonate in today's political strategies, particularly in the use of social media to shape opinion and control narratives. Fear, as Machiavelli noted, remains a powerful unifier, with leaders exploiting external threats to rally their populations and justify extraordinary measures. The delicate balance of appearing both strong and benevolent, a central tenet of Machiavellian thought, is evident in leaders who alternate between projecting authority and showcasing compassion. Even democratic institutions, revered for their transparency, are not immune to manipulation, as leaders subtly exploit these systems to maintain power while preserving the appearance of legitimacy. Contemporary governance also grapples with ethical dilemmas that parallel Machiavellian thought. Balancing national security with individual privacy reflects the tension between protecting citizens and preserving freedoms. Similarly, addressing economic inequality without jeopardizing social order requires careful calibration of policies that satisfy public demands while avoiding instability. Climate change presents another quintessentially Machiavellian challenge: how to mitigate an existential threat without undermining economic growth. Lastly, maintaining democratic institutions during crises, such as pandemics or foreign interference, forces leaders to navigate the precarious balance between rapid action and the erosion of democratic norms. Imagine yourself as a modern leader confronting dilemmas that Machiavelli would find familiar. Your nation faces an imminent terrorist attack. You possess intelligence that could prevent it, but acting on this information risks exposing and endangering your sources, potentially crippling future operations. Do you prioritize the immediate safety of your citizens or the long-term stability of your intelligence network? Early data reveals a deadly pandemic is spreading, but sharing this information could spark widespread panic and economic turmoil. Do you release the truth immediately, risking instability, or delay disclosure to prepare mitigation measures while maintaining public calm? Foreign actors are undermining your nation's democratic institutions through disinformation campaigns. Countering these efforts would require restricting certain freedoms, such as speech and press. How do you protect democracy without becoming a threat to it yourself? Machiavellian principles remain applicable to the challenges faced by modern leaders, corporations, and institutions. These discussion points offer a lens through which to explore the complexities of leadership and ethics. How should leaders maintain authority during global challenges like pandemics or wars? When is transparency more valuable than stability? And how can leaders balance competing interests in pluralistic societies without alienating key groups? In what ways do modern corporations employ Machiavellian strategies to outmaneuver competitors, manage public perception, and navigate regulatory environments? How do political leaders maintain legitimacy in an age where information spreads instantaneously? Is it possible to practice truly ethical leadership within a Machiavellian framework? How do modern leaders reconcile moral imperatives with practical necessities? And what role does public trust play in securing and maintaining power? The story behind Machiavelli's legacy contains fascinating details and controversies that add rich layers to our understanding of this complex figure. Few know that Machiavelli was an accomplished playwright. His comedy The Mandrake, La Mandragola, remains one of the finest examples of Renaissance theater. This satirical work, which tells the story of a clever scheme to seduce a virtuous woman, demonstrates his sharp wit and deep understanding of human nature. The play's success in his lifetime actually exceeded his political writings' fame. It reveals a different side of Machiavelli, the artist who used humor to critique society's hypocrisy. The Catholic Church's swift reaction to Machiavelli's works highlights their disruptive potential. In 1559, his writings were placed on the index of prohibited books, effectively branding them as heretical and dangerous. This condemnation, however, had an unintended effect. The ban elevated Machiavelli's status among Europe's intellectual elite, who sought out his forbidden ideas. Secret copies of The Prince and other works circulated, creating an aura of mystery and rebellion. This paradoxical situation, where prohibition amplified his influence, underscored the power of his ideas and the deep discomfort they caused in traditional institutions. For many, Machiavelli became a symbol of intellectual defiance, and his works inspired debates that shaped modern political thought. The remarkable influence of Machiavelli's ideas on modern leadership training cannot be overstated. His works have become core texts in military academies, where strategies outlined in The Prince are studied alongside historical campaigns. Corporate leadership programs use his insights to teach strategic thinking and decision-making under pressure, while diplomatic training institutes explore his understanding of negotiation, alliances, and the balance of power. Political strategists often draw directly from Machiavelli's principles, whether knowingly or not, applying his pragmatic approach to navigating complex political landscapes. His legacy is deeply woven into the fabric of leadership across industries, shaping how power is understood and exercised. The term Machiavellian originated shortly after Machiavelli's death, initially as a pejorative synonymous with treachery, manipulation, and immorality. Over time, however, its meaning evolved. While it still carries negative connotations in some contexts, it is now often associated with shrewdness, pragmatism, and political realism. This linguistic shift reflects changing attitudes toward the nature of power and governance. What was once condemned as pure evil is now seen as a realistic, albeit controversial, approach to leadership in a competitive and often ruthless world. Beyond his political writings, Machiavelli led a multifaceted life full of surprising details. He was an accomplished musician, composing songs and participating in cultural life. His diplomatic reports were often accompanied by detailed sketches of fortifications, showcasing his keen eye for military strategy. Chronic stomach ailments, possibly resulting from torture during his imprisonment, plagued him throughout his life. Despite exile and financial struggles, he maintained an extensive correspondence network, exchanging ideas with other intellectuals and remaining engaged in political discourse. These details humanize Machiavelli, revealing the complex individual behind the often caricatured thinker. The interpretation of The Prince has sparked centuries of debate, with three major schools of thought dominating the discussion. This perspective views the prince as a practical guide for rulers, emphasizing its revolutionary break from traditional political philosophy. Machiavelli's directness, empirical examples, and pragmatic advice are taken at face value, portraying him as the founder of modern realpolitik. Some scholars argue that the prince is a subtle critique of tyranny and a veiled plea for republican governance. This view suggests that Machiavelli used irony and exaggeration to expose the dangers of authoritarian rule, aligning his true beliefs with the democratic ideals expressed in his other works, such as Discourses on Livy. This interpretation sees the prince as an objective study of power, a methodical exploration of how it is acquired, maintained, and lost. Proponents of this theory highlight Machiavelli's empirical methodology, arguing that his work laid the foundation for modern political science. The question of irony in Machiavelli's writings fuels ongoing scholarly debate. Subtle jokes, classical references, and seemingly outrageous recommendations suggest that the prince may contain layers of meaning. His choice of dedicatee, Lorenzo de' Medici, a ruler Machiavelli could not have admired, has been interpreted as either flattery or satire. Historical examples, while often instructive, sometimes feel exaggerated, raising questions about their true intent. This tension between straightforward advice and hidden critique makes Machiavelli's work endlessly fascinating and open to reinterpretation. Machiavelli's life and writings reflect a tension between his republican ideals and his apparent admiration for authoritarian power. Evidence of his republican leanings includes his lifelong service to the Florentine Republic, the democratic themes and discourses on Livy, and his advocacy for a citizen militia. However, his pragmatic endorsement of absolute power in the prince, his emphasis on control through fear, and his admiration for leaders like Cesare Borgia suggest a more authoritarian side. This duality complicates attempts to categorize Machiavelli and underscores the nuanced nature of his political philosophy. Recent scholarship has expanded the study of Machiavelli in new directions, examining his views on feminine power, particularly his metaphorical use of Fortuna as a woman to be controlled, analyzing how geography and natural resources influenced his political thought, mapping his correspondence networks and the spread of his ideas across Europe, investigating the cognitive and emotional aspects of his political theory, including his insights into fear, ambition, and loyalty. Controversies also persist, such as the true date of the prince's composition, his involvement in anti-Medici conspiracies, and the influence of his diplomatic experiences on his theories. Machiavelli's personal life reveals yet another layer of complexity. Despite his often cynical view of human nature, his marriage was reportedly happy, though long separations tested their bond. He enjoyed practical jokes and carnival festivities, showing a lighter, more playful side. During his exile, he maintained a small farm, finding solace in simple rural life. Financial struggles haunted him, but he continued to write, observe, and contribute to the intellectual world. Machiavelli's enduring appeal lies in his ability to provoke thought, challenge assumptions, and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, leadership, and human nature. Whether studied in military academies, corporate boardrooms, or universities, his works remain a cornerstone of political theory. His life and legacy remind us that the questions he grappled with about morality, pragmatism, and the nature of governance are as relevant today as they were in Renaissance Florence. These behind-the-scenes elements reveal Machiavelli as a more complex and human figure than his reputation suggests. The ongoing debates about his work demonstrate its continuing relevance and the challenge of interpreting a thinker who deliberately wrote on multiple levels. His legacy remains dynamic, with new interpretations and applications emerging as scholars continue to explore the depths of his thought and its implications for modern politics and society. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see, but to few to feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few feel what you are. These words, perhaps more than any others, capture the essence of Machiavelli's profound understanding of human nature and power. As the sun sets on our exploration of this remarkable figure, we find ourselves contemplating a legacy that continues to resonate through the corridors of time. Machiavelli passed away on June 21, 1527, in his beloved Florence. His death, like much of his later life, was marked by a certain irony, occurring just as Florence had once again become a republic, the very form of government he had served and championed in his youth. He never regained his position of political influence, dying as he had lived his final years, an observer rather than a participant in the power games he understood so well. Yet his true victory lay not in political office, but in the realm of ideas. From the depths of exile and personal tragedy, he crafted works that would fundamentally alter how humanity understands power, politics, and leadership. The Prince, initially written as a job application to the Medici family, would become one of the most influential political treatises ever written. The revolution he sparked in political thought cannot be overstated. Before Machiavelli, political philosophy dealt primarily in ideals, how rulers ought to behave, how states should be governed. His genius lay in stripping away these comfortable illusions to reveal the mechanical reality of power. This transformation from prescriptive to descriptive analysis marks the birth of modern political science. Today, his insights resonate with an almost prophetic clarity. In an era of global power politics, media manipulation, and complex leadership challenges, Machiavelli's clear-eyed analysis of human nature and political reality remains startlingly relevant. His understanding that appearance often matters more than reality, that fear can be more reliable than love, and that virtue must sometimes yield to necessity continues to inform leadership strategies across the globe. Perhaps the greatest testament to Machiavelli's genius is how his name has entered our common language. To be Machiavellian is to understand the true nature of power and to be willing to act on that understanding. While often used as a pejorative, this term actually reflects his greatest contribution: the courage to see and describe power as it truly operates, not as we wish it would. As we conclude our journey through the life and legacy of Niccolò Machiavelli, we're left with a profound appreciation for a man who dared to pull back the curtain on political power. His writings, born from personal suffering and keen observation, continue to illuminate the darker corners of human nature and political reality. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest legacy may be his reminder that in studying politics and power, we must deal with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. This unflinching realism, combined with his penetrating insight into human nature, ensures that his voice continues to speak to us across the centuries. For as long as humans struggle with questions of power, leadership, and governance, Machiavelli's insights will remain relevant. His words, written in exile and desperation, continue to echo through time, reminding us that in the eternal dance of power and politics, truth often lies not in what we wish to see, but in what we dare to acknowledge.